Some dogs are never chosen, some people never speak up. But sometimes, two forgotten souls find each other. And when they do, fate changes course. This is the story of Ruby, a shelter dog no one believed in, and Daniel, a young state trooper chasing a childhood dream. Their meeting didn't just change their lives, it changed everything. It was a cold, foggy morning in Rhode Island. The sky hung low, cloaked in a pale gray-white, as if the world itself hadn't quite woken up yet. There was no bird song, no rustling leaves. Just a stillness, like the air was holding its breath for something to change. Officer Daniel O'Neill sat behind the wheel. The flutter in his chest wasn't just another day's adrenaline, it was something deeper, an echo of a dream he had carried for years, joining the K-9 unit. The kind of dream born from childhood documentaries, books, and news stories. The kind that never really leaves you. But dreams don't always fit into the system. The K-9 slots were few. The list of applicants was long. And for someone young, fresh out of the academy like Daniel, there wasn't much room to break in. Despite graduating with honors, he wasn't one to wait around. Instead, after every shift, he started visiting shelters, one by one, standing in front of each kennel making eye contact with every dog. He wasn't looking for the biggest, or the fastest, or even the smartest. He was waiting for something, a spark, a pull, that quiet whisper that says, "It's me." And that morning, he heard it. It happened at a small, out-of-the-way shelter on the city's edge. While other dogs barked and jumped for attention, he noticed the silence, and from inside that silence, two eyes locked onto his. Ruby? She stood apart from the rest, tail down, ears alert. No barking, no jumping. She wasn't trying to be seen, she just was. But in that stillness, there was something sharp, something Daniel could feel in his chest, like she'd been waiting, just for him. The shelter worker stepped up beside him and sighed. "Ruby? Yeah. She's been adopted and returned 4 times. Hyperactive, uncontrollable, almost got euthanized. We've even labeled her as unadoptable." Daniel crouched in front of her kennel. There were wires between them, but the distance didn't feel real. Ruby took one step closer, then another. No bark, just eyes, locked in. Everything else faded. The barking, the worker's words, even the sound of keys clinking on a belt. Only the silence remained, and the look they shared. Daniel whispered, "Maybe the problem isn't her. Maybe no one ever really listened." The worker shrugged. "You won't last a week. She's no K-9, not even close." But Daniel didn't flinch. He placed his hand against the wire, and Ruby, slowly, lifted a paw to meet it. Fragile still, but something passed between them. Something real. The paperwork was signed. Pens scratched on forms. The staff still shook their heads. "You're putting her through K-9 training? With her? You're nuts." Daniel smiled. "I'm used to crazy," he said, "and I don't quit easy." When Ruby walked out of the shelter that day, she didn't look back. It was like she knew this was where she was meant to go. Without a word, she followed Daniel. And just like that, a discarded shelter dog and a young trooper began writing a new fate together. Many people change the lives of animals. But have you ever wondered, can an animal change your life? Daniel thought he was saving Ruby. But in truth, Ruby was rewriting his story. And the most pivotal moment of that story is just ahead. Tell us in the comments. Do you believe an animal can truly change a human's fate? Ruby didn't just enter Daniel's life as a K-9 recruit. She was a lesson in patience, resilience, and trust, wrapped in fur. Working with her wasn't about barking commands or expecting obedience. It was about trust. It was about building a bond, slowly, one breath at a time. The first few days were chaos. Fresh out of the shelter, Ruby reacted to everything all at once. She was overly sensitive to signals, jumped at sudden sounds, ignored some commands entirely, and pushed back hard on others. Some trainers just shook their heads when they saw her on the field. One afternoon, Ruby spun in circles and barked, snapping at her own leash. A trainer smirked. We weren't wrong to label her unadoptable, but Daniel didn't shout. He didn't yank her leash. He knelt to her level, softened his voice, and whispered, "It's okay. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." That night, Daniel wrote in his journal, "She's not just a dog. She's like a wounded child. You don't control her, you talk to her." The next morning, he started running with her. At first, Ruby tugged hard on the leash, zigzagging, stubbornly sitting down mid-route. Daniel never pulled. He stood by her side, waiting. They began learning to breathe together. Daniel observed everything. Which sounds startled her? Which movements intrigued her? When did she feel safe, and when didn't she? One morning, while walking through a muddy stretch of field, Ruby slipped. Her back leg sank into thick sludge. She panicked. The leash went taut. Daniel didn't rush to pull her out. He didn't yell. He crouched low, opened his palm, and whispered, "I trust you." Ruby froze, looked him dead in the eyes, and for the first time, she placed her trembling nose in his hand. Something shifted, not just in her, but between them. Thorns softened, space closed. From that point forward, Ruby began to change. She tracked more carefully, nose low to the ground, alert to the smallest scent. She didn't resist commands. She tried to understand them, because this wasn't just training anymore. It was purpose, shared. One day they were tested with a missing object drill. Ruby had failed before. No one expected her to succeed, but this time she caught the scent, followed the trail, and sat down right at the object, calm, focused. A senior trainer quietly approached Daniel. "She chose you," he said. "You know that, right?" Daniel didn't say much, just smiled, because he had chosen her too. Both had been overlooked. Daniel, the rookie cop, Ruby, the problem dog. But together, they built something real. Months later, it was time for the final certification. The field was crowded with seasoned canine teams, flashy entries, polished routines, but Ruby didn't make a sound. She just looked at Daniel. When the command came, Ruby moved, smooth, focused, silent, over obstacles, toward the target, and when she found it, she sat, steady. A long pause followed. Then one of the evaluators spoke. "The dog they said was unadoptable is now one of our best." Daniel looked at Ruby. She was seated, still watching him, not like she had won something, but like she had finally come home. Ruby and Daniel were no longer just a working pair. They were two souls moving as one, communicating beyond words, connected through breath, instinct, and something deeper than training. They owed each other nothing, but every step they took felt like a quiet thank you. They'd been together for years. Dozens of missing persons cases, countless tracks, searches, calls at midnight. But nothing had shaken them like the call that came one overcast evening in Pine Valley. The dispatch was sharp and cold. 10:57, missing child. Male, age 7, last seen 5:45 p.m. Location, Pine Valley Forest. Daniel froze for a second, closed his eyes, felt the weight in his chest drop like stone. Pine Valley was barely a blip on most maps. Dense woods, steep cliffs, no cell service, fast-dropping temperatures. Dusk was falling, and a 7-year-old out there, alone. Search teams mobilized instantly. Drones launched, thermal imaging deployed. Volunteers lined the forest edge like a human chain. But Daniel didn't look to the sky or the tech. He looked to Ruby. He opened the truck's back door and she didn't leap. She paused, raised her nose, sniffed the air, ears lifted, eyes narrowed. When her paws hit the ground, she didn't bolt. She looked at Daniel first. What she saw wasn't a command. It was a plea. Daniel dropped to his knees, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, steady and low, "There's a child out there. He needs you. You're the only one who can reach him. Go, Ruby. Go!" And Ruby didn't hesitate. Her coat bristled, her body dropped low. She sniffed once, twice, then pressed her nose to the earth and began to move, not with panic, with purpose. Daniel followed step for step. She would stop, double back, test the air, circle wide, return. This wasn't routine. It was a race against time. Every minute meant more risk. Hypothermia, injury, disorientation. Every sound in the forest felt too loud. Every shadow, too quiet. Ruby kept moving, driven not by command, but by something deeper. They reached the forest's interior. The canopy swallowed the last of the daylight. Silhouettes of trees stretched like arms. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. Ruby's instincts were louder than any voice. And then, she stopped. Her nostrils flared. Eyes locked on something unseen. Daniel froze. A branch cracked. Then a whisper, barely a sound. A breath. Ruby bolted. Daniel pushed through brambles behind her, heart pounding, legs burning. In a small clearing, curled in the mud between rocks and moss, there he was, a small boy, torn clothes, scraped knees, no shoes, shaking, mumbling. "Help! I want my mom." Ruby didn't charge in. She dropped low, met his eyes, tilted her head, didn't move, didn't bark, didn't blink, just stayed. Her eyes said it all. "You're safe now. You're not alone." The boy blinked through tears, flinched at first, then stared, and something in him let go. He crawled forward, wrapped his arms around Ruby, clung to her like a lifeline. She didn't move. She didn't breathe heavy. She just let him. Daniel knelt beside them, his voice caught in his throat. His hand shook as he lifted the radio. "Dispatch. This is Trooper O'Neill. Subject located, alive, conscious, found by Ruby." Silence on the other end. Then, "Copy that. Give Ruby a hug for us." Daniel lowered the radio, placed a hand on Ruby's back, his tears soaked into her fur. But Ruby never turned around. She was still watching the boy, still guarding him, because her job wasn't done yet. And in that forest, with all the world quieted, only one thing could be heard: the heartbeat of a miracle. The next morning, the air was still hazy, but the office was calm and quiet. Daniel sat at his desk. His uniform was on, but his tie was loose. The coffee in front of him had gone cold, yet he kept his hands wrapped around the mug, lost in thought. The night before kept replaying in his mind. The forest, the silence, Ruby suddenly breaking into a run, and then that child's face. Beside him, Ruby was curled up on her mat, eyes half closed, ears still alert, as if to say, "The mission's over, but my watch isn't." The phone rang, an unknown number. Daniel answered without hesitation. "Hello? Hi, is this Officer O'Neill speaking?" The woman's voice was soft but fragile. "I'm the mother of the boy who went missing in the forest yesterday." Daniel immediately straightened up. "Yes, ma'am, your son is safe now. He's in good hands." There was a pause. The weight in her voice pressed into the silence. I wanted to thank you, truly, from my heart." "You're welcome," Daniel said. His eyes shifted to Ruby. "But the thanks doesn't belong to me." "To whom then?" she asked, surprised. "To Ruby. She's the one who found him. I just followed her lead." There was silence on the line. Then the woman spoke again. Her voice changed, shaky, like she had touched the shadow of an old memory. "Excuse me, this Ruby you mentioned, was she ever in a shelter?" Daniel's heart quickened. "Yes," he replied cautiously. "She was adopted from a shelter years ago. In fact, no one wanted her. She was even labeled unadoptable. The woman exhaled audibly. Her breath came in short, broken waves. I remember her. I used to volunteer at that shelter. When they found Ruby, she was still just a pup. Shivering, timid, but her eyes looked at you differently. Daniel said nothing. No one wanted her, the woman continued. She was adopted 4 times, brought back 4 times. Everyone said she was too much, but I always believed in her. I used to sit with her, place my hand on her cage. I never forgot her. Daniel's eyes were wet. Ruby, as if sensing the moment, slowly lifted her head. The office was quiet, but Daniel's heart was racing. "You know what?" he said quietly. "Last night she found your son. The entire search team was out there. Nothing. No sign. But Ruby, she just took off. I couldn't stop her. It was like she knew." The woman had begun to cry. "She did it. My Ruby. After all these years, she saved my son. How was that even possible?" Daniel cleared his throat. "Maybe it's her way of saying thank you," the woman whispered through tears. "She never forgot, did she?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. The answer was already in Ruby's eyes. Ruby had completed her mission once again. But this time, she hadn't just saved a life. She had returned the life to the very hands that once saved her. The story of Ruby finding the lost child in the forest began as just a few lines on the morning local news. Brave, K9 finds missing child safe in the woods. But the story didn't stop there. Within hours, television networks, newspapers, and social media all echoed the same question. Who is this heroic dog? The Rhode Island State Police released a brief statement, and soon, Ruby and Daniel's story had captured not just the attention of one state, but the entire nation. National news outlets arrived on scene. Archived footage of Ruby in action played on repeat. On one popular show, they told the story of how Ruby was once rescued from a shelter, labeled unadoptable, and how she rose to become a true hero. A few days later, Daniel stood in front of cameras. His eyes were tired but proud. When the microphones came close, he spoke with quiet strength. "We were just doing our job, but Ruby, she's the one who made it a miracle." The host asked, "Was Ruby special?" Daniel looked down, then slowly nodded. No one believed in Ruby, but someone once fought for her, gave her a chance, and Ruby spent the rest of her life repaying that gift by saving others. The elderly woman from the shelter joined the program. She spoke of the day she first found Ruby, shivering inside a cardboard box, abandoned. "Everyone said she wouldn't make it," she whispered, "but she did, because there was a spark inside her that never went out." For a week, Ruby became one of the most recognized dogs in the country. People flooded animal shelters. Volunteers everywhere said, "I want to give a dog like Ruby a chance." But time moved on, quietly. Ruby's steps had slowed. Her response to loud sounds was less sharp. She rested more often. Daniel noticed it. Still, every time she heard her name, Ruby lifted her head as if to say, "I'm ready." And one morning, what began as an ordinary day quietly became a day of goodbye. Ruby was lying on her porch cushion, her eyes half closed but peaceful. Daniel sat beside her. He rested his head gently against her fur. He said nothing. He just stayed. Hours later, Ruby closed her eyes for the last time. No whimper, no dramatic collapse, just peace and farewell. That day, the Rhode Island State Police issued this statement. K9 Ruby passed away following a sudden, acute, and untreatable illness. Ruby dedicated her life to serving the people of Rhode Island. She made a positive impact on every person she met. She became a symbol of hope for all shelter dogs, showing the world what love and a second chance can do. She wasn't just a trooper. She was part of a loving family. She served right to the end and never stopped doing what she loved most, making people smile. The ceremony held for Ruby was simple, but deeply meaningful. The elderly woman from the shelter came. So did the young boy whose life Ruby had saved. Daniel quietly placed Ruby's collar beside her headstone. He didn't speak, but in that moment, as the silence wrapped around him, a thought echoed within. I didn't just lose a partner. I lost the one who taught me how to believe. The gravestone read, K9 Ruby, they said you were unadoptable. You became a hero. Beneath the stone, a small handwritten note. True heroes don't bark. They are simply felt, and at that moment the wind gently stirred. The leaves softly brushed against each other, as if even nature was bowing its head to say goodbye. As Daniel walked away, he turned one last time. Ruby wasn't there, but her presence was everywhere. Ruby may be gone now, but her story lives on. A journey that began beside a dumpster, a life once labeled unadoptable, and a heart that quietly became a hero. Ruby's trace isn't just in the woods, it echoes in the hearts of those who seek hope, in the eyes of shelter dogs waiting for a second chance, and in every person who still believes in the power of patience and love. She wasn't just Daniel's partner. She's a symbol now. A symbol of love without condition, of belief without proof, of strength in silence. So the next time you visit a shelter and meet a dog who looks a little like Ruby, remember, there may be a miracle waiting behind those eyes. Maybe you've had a Ruby in your life too. Someone who walked beside you in silence, who understood without asking, who held you up when the world was too heavy. If this story reminded you of someone like that, share it in the comments. Because some stories aren't just told, they're felt. And maybe they become someone else's hope too. Share this video. Subscribe for more real-life bonds. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We honor the quiet heroes who leave forever footprints on the heart.